Hello, hockey fans, and welcome to another edition of IceHogs Warm-Up. Joseph Zakshesky with you alongside Brittany Toulis as we get you all squared away for a Calder Cup playoff showdown. Game 1 action between the Rockford IceHogs and the Chicago Wolves taking place out at Allstate Arena in Rosemont, Illinois. And now, certainly, Brittany, these two teams know each other quite well, so a lot to talk about coming up on the program. We'll hear from your coaching staff, your favorite players, as well as dive into the three keys. But, Brittany, this is a team, again, that the IceHogs know really well. They saw them 12 times in the regular season. They even saw him in the last 2 games of the regular season in a home-and-home weekend series, so certainly not a whole lot of what-ifs and interesting storylines as these two teams are pretty familiar with each other.
Yeah, like you said, they've been around the block a couple times with each other, and the Chicago Wolves kind of brought their playoff game to this past weekend as the IceHogs saw. They weren't as prepared as they would like to be on Friday. That third period was phenomenal. They closed a 1-5 gap to 4-5, but then the Wolves got an empty netter, unfortunately, to take that game. But Saturday, they definitely turned it around and kind of stepped up for that last game of the season.
So it was almost a playoff preview here this past weekend as the IceHogs and Chicago Wolves got together for the IceHogs to wrap up the regular season. For the Wolves, it was a part of a 3-game and 3-day weekend for them. Now let's go ahead and take a look at all the latest headlines coming out of that game in Rosemont. That's where the IceHogs would wrap up the regular season. And Teemu Pulkkinen, someone that we're going to talk about a lot in this postseason series and alone here on IceHogs Warm-Up. He certainly got the scoring started, a part of a 2-goal game for him. Anthony Lewis would also find the back of the net. Both teams would contribute on the power play in back-to-back games. The IceHogs at the BMO against this group, and then, of course, for the IceHogs in Rosemont as well. So certainly depth of scoring not an issue for either club, and that's going to be a major factor in this head-to-head showdown.
And I think it's something else that's going to be a major factor in this head-to-head upcoming first round is it was a very tit-for-tat game. One team scored, the other team scored. The gap for Saturday's game was no more than 1 goal the entire time. So it's definitely going to be a very intense, and I have a feeling it's going to be a high-scoring first round, too.
It's going to be a lot of fun to watch, and when you look at how these games map up, I mean, look at the great puck work for the Rockford IceHogs. The Chicago Wolves know how to do it as well. They got some of the best scorers in the American Hockey League, and, of course, a former Hog and Brandon Peary. Also, we mentioned Teemu Pulkkinen. He certainly has found a way to contribute offensively when the time is needed. But for the Rockford IceHogs, compared to what they were going through a couple of months ago now, Brittany, they have some depth, which is nice to see. It's certainly both teams bolstering their rosters, but the IceHogs only a couple of weekends ago received so many skaters down from the Chicago Blackhawks when their season came to an end. So for head coach Jeremy Colleton, maybe after a few times of facing off against this group, has some weapons he might not have had earlier in the year.
Absolutely. We saw David Kampf have a 2-point game on Saturday, and he's one that was just received from the Blackhawks after not playing with the IceHogs since late December. So that depth is definitely coming into play for the IceHogs. And like you said, Lewis is one that's been on the board as of late a lot. Same thing with Tyler Sekura. So the team has depth throughout the lineup. Narelle, who is someone we don't see goals from a lot, also stepped up to the scoring plate. So yeah, the depth is definitely there for them to use.
Exciting to see. And of course, you also see Robin Narelle grab a second, but Matthew Highmore jumping on the score sheet. Brett Sterling, who we're going to talk about a lot in the postseason, he was actually on the Chicago Wolves roster the last time that these two teams got together in the playoffs. And Brittany, let's go ahead and dive right into that one. As again, the IceHogs in the postseason for the 3rd time in the past 4 years, and certainly happy to be back into it, especially after what happened and transpired last year between these two teams. But for the IceHogs and the Wolves, certainly the Illinois Lottery Cup rivalry has gone a number in the regular season, but it's the first time in a while that they've seen each other in the playoffs.
The first time they saw each other in the playoffs was the first time the IceHogs were in the American Hockey League in 2008, and they saw each other in the 2nd round after the IceHogs advanced from defeating your old crew, the Houston Aeros, who are no longer an AHL team, and the Wolves defeated Milwaukee. So that 2nd round came up, and they took it to 7 games. Chicago took the first 2. The IceHogs came back and took the next 3, but Chicago came back and took the final 2. And that was the only series that year to go 7 games after the Wolves took the Calder Cup in that postseason. The
only thing that'll change from that series to this one in terms of the amount of games, this is a best of 5 first-round series between the two clubs, and no off nights for either team. I mean, best of 7, you have a chance to maybe have a rough period or 2 and adjust from there. But Brittany, I mean, both of these teams, even though they know each other well, they know what to expect, they're going to have to be on their A game from the opening puck drop.
Exactly. I heard this from some of the players earlier. With this 5-game series, there's not time to make mistakes. There's not times, like you said, to have an off night. And with the first 2 games coming in within 24 hours of each other, they need to be on point and not make those small mistakes that they were allowed to make in the 12-game series in the regular season.
Well, the IceHogs and Wolves would split that series. We'll dive into that a little bit later on. We'll also catch up with the coaching staff, hear from your favorite players, and review the 3 keys, all coming up here ahead of Game 1 action between the Rockford IceHogs and the Chicago Wolves out in Rosemont. You're watching IceHogs Warm-Up.
Welcome back, fans, to IceHogs Warm-Up. I'm Brittany Tulis alongside Joey Zakcheski as we preview Game 1 of the first round against the Chicago Wolves.
An exciting matchup. The Illinois Lottery Cup extends to the playoffs for the first time since 2008 as the IceHogs and Wolves getting together here tonight at Rosemont. But Game 2 right around the corner as playoff hockey returns to the BMO on Sunday afternoon. So a lot of excitement surrounding this series against two teams that know each other very well.
Know each other very well, and the IceHogs know who on the Wolves to kind of look out for. As they split the series this year, 6-6 for the IceHogs, 6-2, 3-1 for the Wolves, but the Wolves were kind of deadly offensively the entire season, especially these last two games.
And there's been a lot of ebbs and flows in the head-to-head series as well, with the IceHogs splitting that series. Actually, unfortunately, the Illinois Lottery Cup would go back to the Wolves as the first tiebreaker is points. So you see with those overtime losses and the shootout loss that Chicago would suffer to Rockford that they would claim the Illinois Lottery Cup. But all of that turns aside here in the postseason. And you mentioned how high scoring these games have been, but at the same time, they've been neck and neck. You mentioned tit for tat in the opening segment. It's been a lot of one-goal games and a lot of nitty-gritty contests between two teams that flat out don't like each other.
Yeah, especially with all the penalties we saw the IceHogs take, which is kind of out of character for them. They are the lowest penalty minute team throughout the regular season, but took 6 penalties over Saturday's game, which unfortunately Chicago was able to convert into 2 power play goals. But on the flip side of that, their power play has kind of gotten better with getting 2 out of the 7 power play goals.
And that's going to be a major factor going into tonight's matchup for the Rockford Ice and the Chicago Wolves, all on the line here as they start game number 1 of this best of 5 series. Again, game 1 tonight out in Rosemont, game 2 tomorrow, and that is a Sunday afternoon at the BMO Harris Bank Center. And Brittany, again, 6-6 head-to-head record. A lot of one-goal games is going to come down to the wire. I say we dive into the 3 keys.
So the first one we kind of just touched on, special teams. Their power play has been on the upswing, but they need to get better on the penalty kill.
And that's something that's really been a thorn in the side of a Rockford IceHogs group that's been very impressive over the last 21 games or so. In fact, points in 16 of their last 21. But if they had to focus on what they want to change, it's going to be on the defensive side of the puck. Head coach Jeremy Colleton was very adamant about that during Hog Talk the other day. He was very adamant about that during Media Day as well. It's the defense that he is wanting to lock down here against the Chicago Wolves group that is gifted offensively. We saw Teemu Pulkkinen score 2 goals in each of the last 2 games in this head-to-head series. Brandon Peary has been an offensive weapon. The former Hog knows how to contribute against his former club. And of course, the power play for the Chicago Wolves, if they get opportunities, they are right there as one of the top power plays in the American Hockey League. And I can only imagine it's only going to get better for them and jump on those opportunities here in the playoffs. So special teams, especially the penalty kill, is going to have to rise to the task for the Rockford IceHogs.
So for the second one, we saw them kind of do this on Friday. Don't chase goals. Don't dig yourself into too deep of a hole that we have to claw out of.
It was something that I found rather interesting as one of the keys for head coach Jeremy Colleton, what he wrote up on the dry erase board. He says, be patient but relentless. Don't feel like you have to push the play to generate offense or at least generate a chance. And for the Rockford IceHogs, they did chase that a little bit. Chicago would get scoring offensively, and then they generate offense off of turnovers, frazzle up the Rockford IceHogs. But if they're chasing the Wolves around, that means Chicago is executing their game plan and forcing the IceHogs to stay on their heels. Now for Rockford, how do they execute theirs? They've been a very physical team here in the second half of the season. You get an influx of veteran presence that helps keep the locker room cool, calm, and collected. So for the IceHogs, if something goes a little awry, it's not time to hit the panic button in that opening period or throughout the contest. They just have to keep calm and not have to chase the game.
So for tonight's matchup, it's the 13th time these two teams are seeing each other this season, and we know the Wolves has some sharpshooters. You mentioned Teemu Pulkkinen and TJ Tynan also have 12 combined goals in the 12 games that they've seen each other, so watch out for those sharpshooters. And
that's something that they're going to zero in on. A lot of the local media was talking about that as well. Teemu Pulkkinen, what's it going to take for the Rockford IceHogs to keep him at bay? And the IceHogs were also very adamant. They're like, you know what? Those are very gifted players in terms of offensive weapons and tit-for-tat goal scoring. The Chicago Wolves probably had that slight advantage, and we saw that with what Teemu Pulkkinen did just in the last 2 games, let alone in the overall head-to-head series. So for the Rockford IceHogs, they're going to have to manage how he's going to control the puck, keep plays to the outside. A full 5-man defensive effort is going to have to come back and support the defensive group. So for the IceHogs, they're going to be aware, and they're going to know what these guys are going to be capable of, but at the same time, it shouldn't be any difficult to adjust what they have to offer.
It's playoff hockey, and now it's time to play that nice, simple hockey we saw them for the second half of the year that worked, and I think they can do that tonight. Well, that'll do it for IceHogs Warm-Up before Rockford begins their hunt for the Calder Cup when they take on the Wolves in Rosemont for Game 1.
The diagnosis of the game with head coach Jeremy Colleton is coming up after the break as IceHogs Warm-Up continues. For Brittany Tulis and everyone here at IceHogs Warm-Up, I'm Joseph Zakcheski.